Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, Sherrone Moore, Michigan, wrapping up their second scrimmage of fall camp. And the storyline of the second scrimmage, and it's really not just for Michigan, it's for a lot of programs across the country, is this is where guys start to separate and kind of put a stamp on, hey, who are going to be the starting guys for Michigan rolling into 2025. And look, we ain't even going to talk that much about the quarterback battle. Like once again, and from this scrimmage, like Bryce Underwood putting a stamp on, he's the starting quarterback of this football team. I think for a lot of Michigan fans that follow this program damn closely, it's what's going to be the supporting cast? What are going to be the guys around Bryce Underwood going into 2025? Now, specifically, my where I want to focus in on is on the offensive line, where we had a couple of position battles that we saw pop up through fall camp. Sounds like some of those position battles are coming to a close. That's where we're going to start. Got a couple breakout names to talk about on the defensive side of the football. Now, Dill, we're going to do something interesting with this episode where we're going to go through some of this fall camp buzz that we're getting, but we're going to put it in the scope of, hey, what does it mean for that week 2 matchup against Oklahoma? Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, the Michigan fans, appreciate you guys, man. It been a blast talking this football team. The amount of support y'all continue to show means the world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Deal without further ado. We came into fall camp with, I think it's fair to say, 2 position battles on the offensive line. You know, we knew Andrew Sprague was going to be this starting right tackle. We knew Greg Crippen was going to be our starting center, and we knew Gio was going to be our starting left guard. We had a position battle for left tackle. We had a position battle for right guard, and it sounds like we're sitting here after the second scrimmage, and we have a pretty good feel that Evan Link's going to be our starting left tackle. Nate Afobe's going to be our starting right guard. What I will ask you right now is, knowing what the starting 5 is starting to look like, how are we feeling about this offensive line going into 2025?
Well, I think, you have more confidence than last year because guys have put their stamp on their positions. Like last year, like battles are running into the week 2, week 3 of the season.
Yeah, not
Like
good.
that's not where you want to be, especially when you're not like a wildly deep unit. Like the fact that Afobe's kind of put his stamp on that position and won a battle with, again, more guys to beat out than there were last year. Like last year, they got 6 guys maybe. Like beating out Brady Norton, Lawrence Tatar, guys who have played a ton of football, albeit at lower levels. Nate Afobe kind of taking that over.
You'll know who he also beat out. And sorry to interrupt you, Jake Quinera. Like, I think they were trying to get this kid on the football field. Hey, we can't get him over Greg Crippen at center. We think this kid's a really good football player going into his second year. I think they also gave Jake Quinera a shot to go out and win that right guard job. And Nate Afobe beats Jake Quinera out, who might be the second best option at that position. Sorry.
And then that's where you get into the one big question is Evan Link. Because at the end of the day, Evan Link just didn't play very good last year. And again, he did certainly get better down the stretch, but he's still the guy you're kind of looking at like, again, is he kind of physically matured to the level that he needs to be to play a team like Oklahoma or Texas or those sort of big teams with like NFL talent on the edge? Because last year, it just felt like when guys got their hands on him, he wasn't strong enough to deal with it. Like he was plenty athletic enough. He's got the traits. He's really long. There's things you like about what he has, but the strength just wasn't particularly close last year. I do wonder, like, has he put that on and developed himself in the way he needs to be a really
because he had the size. I don't think he was carrying that size all that well, right? And I'll just say this, like, go back to Evan Link coming out of high school. If you would have told me he's going to have to be your starting tackle as a redshirt freshman, I think a lot of Michigan fans would have been concerned. Like, he was not one of those guys that you thought was going to hit the ground running in 12 months. Can be a really good football player. Had a lot of work and wood to chop, so to speak, to get on the football field. Why feel more confident in Evan Link going into 2025? Just allow me to put on my maize and blue tinted glasses on real quick. Number one, like you said, another year of physical development, which I think is massive for a kid like Evan Link because that's where he struggled with the most, even coming out of high school. Number two, Dill, back at the position that he's a little bit more comfortable at. You know, Sherrone Moore said it. Evan Link said it himself as well. Yeah, I played left tackle my whole life. The high school ranks, as a freshman here at Michigan, then as a redshirt freshman, had to switch over to right. Maybe some growing pains were there. And then, Dill, lastly, I I feel better about Evan Link winning the job this year than I did last year. I mean, beating out Andrew Gentry and Jeff Percy, not a shot at those two guys, but there's a reason they're at other programs now. Now you beat out a guy like Andrew Babaloa, who we've heard only good things about since this kid has stepped foot on campus. You have a better feel that we're putting Evan Link on the field because he showed us he can be a really good tackle, as opposed to, hey, you're the only option we have, so we got to throw you out there. And he got better, man. Like, I know it wasn't great from him last year. He got better as the season went on. He got his tail whipped against Texas week 2. And that's kind of burned into a lot of our brains. The kid got better with a full off season, staying healthy. I'm pretty sure he was healthy all spring practice and fall camp. There's a good chance. Again, you see, and I'm sorry I'm rambling, so I'll cut it short, I promise. When you have a guy that going into year 2 to year 3, like, you normally see some jumps. When you have a guy that's going into like year 5, year 6 with this COVID stuff, they don't get much better. Normally they are what they are by a redshirt senior year. Evan Link's is still a guy that I think can get better at the sport. So that's it was a little longer than a 30-second elevator pitch on why I think Evan Link can be a better football player this year than what he was last year. And I think you're right, man. I think you're right. Like, if Evan Link can figure it out, this should be a good starting 5. And it's a deeper starting 5, or it's a deeper offensive line as well. Donovan and McCulley, like, the buzz continues to grow. What stands out to me here is it's very clear it's every single day with this kid. Every single day we line up on a scrimmage. Every single day we go practice. He is clearly the best wide receiver on this football team. That's big because we were looking for a wide receiver 1 to step up, and it sounds like it's going to be Donovan McCulley. My question is, what's the supporting cast look like? Who's your wide receiver 2? Who's your wide receiver 3? Who's your wide receiver 4? Are you concerned about other names stepping up in this wide receiver room going into 2025?
I think you wish you heard a little bit more buzz about some other guys, and I feel like you've heard, again, the freshman mentioned at times, Andrew Marsh, especially in the fall camp season, like, getting his shine and sounding like a guy who's going to play. I kind of wish you maybe heard a little bit more about Samaj and Freddie Moore as, like, guys who they're not coming off the field a whole lot, because Samaj Morgan, I still watch, like, I mean, him with an offense that's competent and can give him like matchups in some space, I think can be a really, really good player. That just wasn't what Michigan had last year because of quarterback and the fact that you didn't really have a wide receiver on the boundary who can make anything happen. So McCulley really emerging makes me feel really good about what Samaj can do. But I think it's fair to say you wish you heard more consistent buzz. Like, yeah, Fred Moore and Samaj are dominating. They're getting open a lot and being really
here's what I'll say about that. And again, maybe I'm putting on my tinted glasses once again, which has been known to happen from the kid. Donovan McCulley emerging as that wide receiver 1, letting Fred Moore and Samaj Morgan settle into that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 role. That's big for both of those cats. Because I look at Samaj Morgan and say, I would be concerned if I was hearing Samaj Morgan as the wide receiver 1, like the guy that we're building this passing attack through, because that's not the kind of pass catcher football player he is. I think Freddie Moore has a chance, but him as a wide receiver 2 this year probably gives me a little bit more optimism too. Knowing that you have that big body on the outside that can be your wide receiver 1, I think puts Freddie Moore and Samaj Morgan in better situations to be successful in 2025. Now, I'm with you, though. Wish we heard a little bit more from these cats, but I do think that's the best situation for them to be successful in 2025.
And again, it's always hard to know. Like, we're kind of reading tea leaves and picking, and Sherrone Moore's not talking much, and Ron Bellamy's not talking much, as Michigan never has. So maybe it's just like, okay, it's established that Donovan McCulley is the guy, and that's kind of what the beat reporters hear, if you will. It doesn't necessarily mean that those guys aren't going to be huge contributors.
Yeah,
but like,
the new face. Like, when you have new faces that come into your program, they're the ones that get more of the conversation around them, right? That's what people want to read. All right, let's go to the defense side of the football and talk about a player that we briefly mentioned because we thought he had a decent spring game, but we weren't really sure how much he was going to play. That's David Pelepele going into his second year. 6'2", 340 pounds. By far the biggest defensive lineman that Michigan has on this roster. It is a uphill battle for this kid to get on the football field consistently in 2025, but the buzz seems to be a little bit real. And this is what I'll say about David Pelepele is, look, if he's ready to play, he will provide some value because you look at the other defensive linemen on this roster and say, all right, Rayshon Benny around 305, Trey Pierce around 300, Demond Payne around 300. I mean, outside of Trey Williams, you don't really have that other fire hydrant that can take on some double teams and be really physical at the point of attack. David Pele. Like maybe he can be that guy for Michigan. Maybe a skill set that Michigan wants to add to this defensive line. What do you expect out of David Pele going into 2025?
And I'm kind of with you. I certainly wouldn't expect a lot. I did think he was further along in that spring game.
I
I
agree.
thought a pretty good game. He was able to shed some blocks. He's not getting moved a ton, which is kind of what you figured he'd be able to provide. But again, you got to be able to be decent at the rest of that game. So he probably does have a niche to carve out in this defense, but
Agreed.
it's very situational, I would think.
So here's what I'll say that kind of fires me up about it. And again, am I buying that he's going to play 30 snaps a game? No. We talk about this all the time. Where's the engine of this Michigan defense? It's out on the edge and it's with your linebackers. If you want to maximize the impact that Ernest Hausman and Jay-Sean Barham can have, you got to have defensive linemen where we're like, we don't need penetration. We don't need 8+ sacks, but we got to have guys that can eat up some double teams and keep our linebackers free. Maybe David Pele can play that kind of role for Michigan on the defensive line, which I think is intriguing as well. Last one, Jair Hill putting it all together. Like again, very similar to how Donovan McCulley's getting buzz as that wide receiver one. Jair Hill is getting that buzz as the cornerback one of this football team and putting him in a spot where he could be a top 50 NFL draft pick over the next 8 months. Why is that so big for me? Tying it back into that Oklahoma matchup week 2. Dill, I look at Oklahoma and say, I know there's been some other wide receivers that have generated some buzz. There's only one name that really scares us right now. That's Deion Burks. Well, if you have a cornerback one in Jair Hill that maybe can go a long way in trying to take away somebody like Deion Burks, I think that makes this Oklahoma offense a little bit easier to deal with in that week 2 matchup. And if Jair Hill can be that guy similar to how Michigan would use Will Johnson against some of the better wide receivers on their schedule the last couple of years, that's huge for what Michigan can do week 2 on the road in Norman, Oklahoma.
In Jair Hill, like the fact that it's been consistent, because he's another one that you heard the flashes last year. Now you were really excited about what he was. And frankly, he had an awesome year for the most part. Like I do feel like, again, there were those couple double moves that Winks brought up and everybody kind of saw in big moments early in the season. Beyond that, like he was nails. I thought he was awesome for Michigan. So he's like, again, a guy that you haven't heard any of that inconsistency stuff with him that you probably heard a little bit in the offseason last year. I am excited. I think you got a very, very good possibility you got a first round corner.
It's the Jair Hill conversation. I feel like we're way overblowing the quote unquote inconsistency from this kid last year.
Well, I mean, we are probably to an extent, but like Winks, it's not.
Was it any worse than Will Johnson? Look, Will Johnson would get caught being a little bit aggressive at times, right? Was it any worse than that? I don't know. I feel like there's just like this narrative because Wink did get up there and say that. And I trust Wink more than my eyes. I'll be upfront about that. Wink's smarter than me when it comes to ball. But I go back and I'm like, he was just really, really good last year. And so I'm very, very excited about what he can be going into year 3. And that takes a lot of pressure off the rest of this defense when you have, Michigan fans, we know this. Like when Will Johnson was healthy, this defense was so hard to deal with because he could erase a side of the football field. Can Jair Hill be that guy for Michigan? It's going to help Michigan, and not just that Oklahoma game. It's going to help Michigan in a lot of football games in that 2025 year. Dill, this is, name me on this depth chart right here. Is there any other position battle that we're kind of monitoring? Like maybe who's going to be your starting nickel? Maybe who's going to be your other safety next to TJ Metcalf while Rod Moore is working back? Outside of that, I feel like we got a pretty good feel of what our 2 deep is going to look like, which is a far cry from where we were 12 months ago, where we didn't have a damn clue about what this Michigan football team is going to look like. And I think that's good, especially when you want to start hot in the college football season with that week 2 matchup against Oklahoma.
The position battles are limited at this point. And again, they existed for some time in the offseason, but they finished up on the right schedule, I think, where guys did cement their jobs and
Yes.
the coaches felt pretty confident moving forward. Like, because that was the problem last year. Is there just weren't a ton of positions you had any real confidence in.
We'll close it out there. Fire me out, man. We're close. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.